My name is Paul Chandler, 61 years old, and for 20 years I was the man who paid for a Christmas everyone said I ruined. This year I heard my son-in-law tell the neighbors my family only breathed easier when I wasn't around, while my own card was paying for the party he stood in. Something in me went very quiet. At 6 o'clock that evening, my phone started to ring. Not one call, one after another, until the screen wouldn't go dark. I didn't show up this year, and I didn't pay a single cent. I just never expected what came next. Before I take you back there, do me one small favor. Take a second to like and subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. It helps more than you know. Now let me take you back to last December, the night everything I'd carried for 20 years finally cracked open. The planning meeting was at Diane's house, the second Saturday of December. She had a clipboard. My daughter always had a clipboard. She stood at the head of her own dining table and read out jobs, like a foreman on a job site. Danny would haul the tables. Greg would handle the bar. Aunt Ruth would bring the pies she always brought. Then she got to me. "Dad, you don't have to do anything," Diane said. She smiled the smile she used in front of people. "Just show up on time, and try not to talk like last year." Greg laughed into his coffee. A short, easy laugh. I sat there in the chair nobody else wanted, near the kitchen door, and I nodded. "All right," I said. "I'll be on time." I didn't say the rest. I never said the rest. Because 40 minutes earlier, before any of them woke up, I'd already signed the deposit check for the banquet hall. $3,200, made out to Smith Hall Events. The same place, the same December, the same as always. Nobody asked who paid it. That was the part nobody ever asked. I drank my coffee. I listened to my daughter explain how the night would run, how the photos would be staged, how the seating would go. I noticed my chair was at the far end again, past the kids' table, near the door. Try not to talk like last year. I kept turning that over. What had I done last year? I genuinely couldn't tell you. But the way she said it, soft and bright, you'd think I'd ruined something sacred. On the drive home, my phone buzzed against the cup holder. I glanced down at a stoplight. A text from the bank. Deposit cleared. $3,200. I stared at it longer than the light was green. The man who ruined Christmas. That's what I'd become, somewhere along the way. It started small. It always starts small. 3 years back, Diane handed me the ham 40 minutes before dinner and told me to glaze it. I'm a man who reads instructions. I followed hers exactly. It came out dry. By the time the guests sat down, the story had already changed. Dad insisted on doing the ham, she told the table. I told him not to. She hadn't. But the room laughed, and I let it go. 2 years back, I told a story over dessert about pulling wire in an old farmhouse. The kind of thing I'd done my whole working life. A long story, maybe. Greg checked his watch where everyone could see it. Diane touched my arm. "Okay, Dad, let people eat." Last year, I don't even remember the crime. A wrong word, a wrong look. By morning, it was settled fact. I'd made things awkward again. Here's the part that took me 20 years to see. Every single time I ruined something, the next day there'd be a phone call. Gentle, apologetic almost. "Dad, since the dinner got a little rough, would you mind covering the extra catering? Just to smooth it over." And I always did. Because smoothing it over felt like being needed. I never once connected the two. The blame in the evening, the bill in the morning. Year after year, the same rhythm, and I danced to it without ever hearing the music. It took 20 years for me to finally see the pattern laid out flat. And once you see a thing like that, you can't stop seeing it. I just didn't know yet how far down it went. You should meet them the way I see them. Around a table, which is where this family does all its real work. Diane sits at the head now. 38, married well, dressed like the photos she posts. My daughter can run a room. She decides who's happy and who's the problem, and somehow it's never her. Greg sits to her right, my son-in-law, 41, firm handshake, talks over people like it's a sport. He sells commercial real estate and treats every dinner like a closing. Then Danny, my son, 34, grease under his nails, the only honest face at the table. He fixes engines for a living and never once pretended I was anything but his father. And Aunt Ruth, my sister, 64, sharp as a tack, the one person in that room who's earned everyone's respect and never asked for it. That night, mid-December, we sat for supper at Diane's. Danny set down his fork. "You know, Dad does a lot more than people." "Danny." Diane didn't even look up. Pass the rolls. He passed the rolls. Greg leaned back, hooked an arm over his chair, and looked at me like I was furniture. Let the grown-ups handle it, Paul. You just sit there and stay warm. The table chuckled. I watched my son's jaw tighten. I said nothing. 20 years of saying nothing has a sound, if you listen for it. Across the table, Ruth set down her water glass. She didn't laugh. She looked straight at me, the way she's looked at me since we were kids, in a house with thin walls. How long, she said, quiet enough for just us, are you going to take this? I didn't have an answer. Not yet. Here's what you have to understand about a man like me. I never wanted to be at the head of the table. I just wanted to belong somewhere along it. My wife Carol passed 20 years ago. Diane was 18, Danny was 14. The house went so quiet I thought it might swallow us. So I did the only thing I knew. I kept the lights on, I kept the food coming. I kept Christmas, because Carol had loved Christmas, and as long as the family came home for it, I could tell myself we were still a family. That was the deal I made in my own head. Pay for the gathering, and you get to keep the people. Nobody ever told me that wasn't how it worked. 2 weeks before that supper, I'd sat in a doctor's office. He showed me a picture of my heart on a screen and used the word strain. He told me to cut back. Less lifting, less stress. What's eating at you, Paul? He asked. I didn't tell him about the clipboard. My pension covers my needs and not much past them. Every December, I quietly went past them. I told myself it was love. Maybe some of it was. Then, over that same supper, Diane mentioned, light as anything, that Greg had a project coming up, that Danny might pitch in with a loan. My son, who saves in a coffee can. They'd done it to him before, and something cold settled in my chest, right where the doctor said the strain was. If I didn't stop this now, I never would. They'd bleed me, then him, then whoever came next. A man has to draw a line somewhere. I just hadn't found mine yet. There's a thing about being the quiet one. People stop watching what your hands are doing. For years, I'd handled the boring parts of Christmas, not the fun parts, the invoices. Somewhere around the 3rd or 4th December, Diane had said, Dad, can you just set up the payments? You're good with that stuff. And I was, so I did. The banquet hall, the bakery, the lighting company that strung the place every year, the rental tables, the lemons, the florist. One by one, I'd put them on automatic payments out of my own account, because it was easier than chasing checks, and because being useful felt like being loved. What none of them ever noticed was whose name sat on those contracts. Not Diane's, not Greg's, mine. Paul Chandler, on every single one. The account holder, the payer, the man the vendors called when something went wrong and never told the family about, because I always just handled it. To everyone at that table, Christmas simply appeared. The hall was booked, the cake showed up, the lights came on. Magic, more or less. Diane took the credit in front of the neighbors, and I let her, because what father doesn't want his daughter to shine? I sat at my kitchen table that night and pulled up the accounts I hadn't really looked at in years. Vendor after vendor, autopay after autopay, all flowing out of one account. Mine. They thought Diane held the keys to Christmas. They'd thought it so long, it had become true in their minds. But every door to that holiday opened with my key. Every single one. I just hadn't decided yet whether to use that or change the locks. I found out for sure 2 days later, in the worst possible way. It was a Sunday. Diane had asked me to drop off the extra folding chairs at her place. I pulled into the driveway, arms full, and came around the side of the house toward the back patio. Greg was out there with 2 of the neighbors, the Harpers from across the street. He had a beer in one hand and that closing the deal voice going. I stopped at the corner of the house. They couldn't see me. Honestly, it runs smoother every year, Greg was saying. Diane's got a system. One of the Harpers said something about how nice the party always was. Yeah, well, Greg took a drink. Between you and me, it's better when the old man stays out of it. He just gets in the way. We carry the whole thing, me and Diane. He shows up and finds something to ruin. And then I heard her. Diane. Standing right beside him. She laughed. My daughter laughed, easy and warm, and didn't say one word to correct him. I stood at the corner of my daughter's house with 4 folding chairs in my arms, and I felt something I'd been holding for 20 years just quietly set itself down. I want to be honest with you, because I've thought about this moment 1,000 times since. I wasn't angry. I keep waiting, even now, to feel the anger, and it never quite comes. What I felt was clear. For the first time in years, I could see the whole thing, top to bottom. No fog. We carry the whole thing. The old man just gets in the way. I set the chairs down against the fence. Quietly. I didn't announce myself. I got back in my truck and I drove home, and I didn't turn on the radio. That night I opened my laptop and I started reading every contract, one by one, from the beginning. I'm a man who likes a number. Numbers don't laugh at you. So that night I built one. 20 Decembers. Halls and cakes and lights and rentals and the gifts I bought that wore other people's tags. I went back through old statements until my eyes burned and I added it all up. The total sat there on my screen, glowing in the dark kitchen. I won't say the number out loud. But each year it came to about what a decent used car costs. Stretch that over 20 Decembers, and you're looking at a paid-off mortgage, or the comfortable retirement my doctor wished I had. I'd handed it over a slice at a time, and called each slice love. I sat with that for a long while. Then I did the math that actually mattered. Not the money. The other thing. In 20 years of paying, how many times had I felt like a father at that table, and not a wallet with a pulse? I couldn't think of one. Not one. That's when I decided. I wasn't going to fight anybody, I wasn't going to make a scene, or send a furious message, or shame them in front of the neighbors. That's not who I am, and it's not how you win this. I was simply going to stop. This year, I would not show up. And every payment I'd been making, out of the goodness of a heart the doctor said was strained, I would put back where it belonged. But I'd do it the right way. I'd warn the family first. I wouldn't leave a vendor unpaid, or a stranger holding my mess. I opened a new message to Diane. I typed 3 sentences. My thumb hovered over send. Then I stopped. There was one thing I had to do first. Monday morning I made phone calls. Calm ones. The kind of calls a man makes when he's finally doing the obvious thing. I started with Smith Hall Events. A pleasant woman named Sharon answered. I'm the account holder on this year's booking, I said. I'd like to cancel my reservation. And cancel the automatic payment going forward. A pause. Keys clicking. Mr. Chandler, you've held this account a long time. You sure you want to cancel? I'm sure, but I don't want to leave anyone stranded on the holiday. I'd thought about how to say this. My daughter, Diane Whitlock, is the one who actually runs the event. If she wants the hall, she can book it in her own name and put it on her own card. Send her over to you. I'll give you her number. Another pause, longer this time. I'm sorry, sir. I want to make sure I have this right. Every year, the booking and the payment have come from you. Every year, I agreed. But not this year. This year, whoever wants the party puts their own name on the line for it. I made the same call to the bakery, to the lighting company, to the rental outfit and the florist. Same words, more or less. Cancel my account. If my daughter wants to keep the order, she can set it up herself, in her name, on her card. I'm not pulling the plug on anyone. I'm just taking my name off the bottom of the page. I want you to notice what I didn't do. I didn't stiff a single vendor. I didn't cancel out of spite and leave a stranger holding an empty bag. Every vendor knew exactly how to keep the order alive. Diane just had to do the one thing she'd never had to do before, and sign for it herself. It took less than an hour. 20 years, undone in less than an hour, over a cup of coffee at my own kitchen table. When I hung up the last call, the woman from the florist said something that stayed with me. Sir, can I ask, is everything all right at home? I told her it was, finally. Danny came by Tuesday after his shift, still in his work shirt, that engine smell coming off him like it always does. He stopped in the doorway and looked at me. You're different, he said. What happened? So I told him. The patio, Greg's voice, Diane's laugh, the contracts, the phone calls, all of it, plain. My son sat down at the kitchen table and put his face in his hands for a second. When he looked up, his eyes were wet. Dad, I have wanted to say something for years, he said. Every time. And every time she shut me down before I got 2 words out. I'm sorry. I should have fought harder for you. You were one voice against a room, I told him. That's a hard place to stand. It's not right what they did. What she did. He shook his head. Sag, but she's your daughter. She is. I let that sit. And I helped make her this way. I paid for every problem until she stopped seeing them as problems. That's on me too. Danny wiped his face with the back of his hand. So what do you need from me? Nothing loud, I said. I don't need you to fight anybody, son. I'm done fighting. I looked at him. I just need you to tell the truth, if anyone ever asks you straight. He held my eyes a long moment. Then he nodded, once. the way his grandfather used to. "If they ask me straight," he said, "I'll tell them exactly what I've seen." There was something in how he said it, like he'd been carrying a thing of his own, waiting for the right day to set it down. I didn't ask what. I should have. Diane called Wednesday evening, bright and breezy, the way she always opened. "Hi, Dad." "So, 2 things. The Petersons are bringing extra guests, so we'll need a bigger cake. And the florist wants confirmation on the centerpieces. Can you handle both like usual?" There it was, like usual. "No," I said. "I can't this year." A small laugh. She thought she'd misheard. "What do you mean you can't? It's just a couple calls." "I mean, I won't be coming to Christmas this year, Diane. And I've reorganized my own expenses. Going forward, the people hosting the party will be paying for it." The line went quiet. I could hear her breathing change. What did you say? Your own expenses?" "My expenses," I said gently. "The hall, the cake, the lights, all of it's been coming out of my account for 20 years. I've canceled my bookings. If you still want the party, you'll need to book it yourself. In your name, on your card." "Dad, you can't just..." Her voice climbed. "Do you have any idea how this looks? You want to ruin Christmas for the kids? Is that it? You want to make everyone miserable over some grudge?" "I don't want anyone miserable," I said. "I want to stop paying for a party I'm only welcome to fund." "That is so unfair, after everything we do for you." I almost laughed. I didn't. I kept my voice level, the way you do on a job when someone's panicking and you're not. "The hall will need to hear from you if you want to keep the date," I said. "Same with the bakery. I'd call them tomorrow. They book up fast this time of year." "What are you talking about, Dad? Dad, what do you mean book it myself?" I told her good night. I meant it kindly. Then I set the phone down on the counter, face up, and watched it light up again. And again. By Thursday, she'd called in the cavalry. My phone filled up. Cousins I hadn't heard from since summer. An uncle on Carol's side. A family friend who just wanted to check in. Every message wore the same coat. "We're worried about you, Paul. This isn't like you. Diane's beside herself. Don't let pride wreck the holidays. Think about the grandkids." One cousin came right out with it. Selfish was the word she used. Selfish, at your age, over money. I sat in my recliner and read them all, and I felt the old things start to crawl up my spine. The guilt. 20 years of it knows exactly where you live. For about an hour, I nearly folded. I'm not too proud to tell you that. I thought, just pay it, Paul. Keep the peace. It's only money. It's Christmas. That's the voice that had cost me 20 years. Soft, reasonable, wearing the face of love. My thumb actually moved toward Diane's name. To call her. To fix it. Then my phone buzzed with one more message. From Ruth. "I know what's happening. I've watched it for years and held my tongue. Don't you dare fold now, Paul. Not this time. I'm with you." I read it twice. My sister doesn't waste words. When Ruth says she's with you all the way down. I set the phone in my lap. My hands were shaking a little. I'm a steady man, but they were shaking. I didn't answer the cousins. I didn't call Diane. I just sat in the quiet of my own house, the one I'd kept warm for everybody else for 20 years, and I let the phone ring itself out. It's a strange feeling, choosing yourself for the first time at 61. Greg didn't call. Greg showed up. Friday night, headlights in my driveway, then his fist on my door, heavier than it needed to be. I opened it. He filled the frame, jaw set. That closing the deal energy turned mean. "We need to talk, Paul." "Come in then." He didn't sit. He stood in my living room like he was appraising it for resale. "You're embarrassing this family," he said. "Diane's a wreck. The vendors are calling her like she's some deadbeat. You think this makes you look strong? It makes you look bitter." I stood there and let him run. "You made a commitment," he went on. "Every year, the same deal. You don't just yank it out from under everyone 2 weeks before Christmas because your feelings got hurt." "What commitment did I make, Greg?" That stopped him for half a second. "You always pay. Everyone knows that." "Everyone assumed that," I said. "That's different." His face went red. "You're really gonna do this? Over what exactly?" I thought about telling him I'd heard him on the patio. The old man just gets in the way. I decided he didn't get to know that yet. "The contracts have names on them," I said instead. "Whoever's name is on it pays it. That's how it's always worked. You just never had to read them." "This is a disgrace." He stepped closer, looming. Diane carries this whole family. Then she can carry Christmas, I said quietly. He stared at me like he didn't recognize the furniture, talking back. I walked to the door and opened it. The cold December air came in. Good night, Greg. Drive safe. He left. He had to. There was nothing left to say to a man who'd finally run out of yes. I locked the door behind him. I wasn't there for this part. Danny was. He told me later, sitting at my kitchen table, and I'll tell it the way he told me. Diane went down to the banquet hall to rebook it in her own name, sure it would be a 5-minute formality. Sharon from the office sat her down and slid a fresh contract across the desk, along with a printed quote for the night. Since you're booking it yourself this year, ma'am, here's what the date runs, Sharon said gently. Hall, catering, bar, the works. We'll need a card on file and a deposit to hold it. And she turned the quote around so Diane could see. Danny said he watched his sister's face do something he'd never seen it do. The color left it. Her eyes moved down the page, line by line. The hall, the catering, the bar, the lights, the flowers. Numbers she had never in her life had to look at. At the bottom, the total. Then Sharon, trying to be helpful, pulled up the account history on her screen. You've been with us a long time as a family. Same booking every December. She paused, reading. Always under the same name, looks like. Diane leaned in, and there it was, year after year, paid in full. Paul Chandler. Paul Chandler. Paul Chandler. She just sat there, Dad, Danny said, staring at that screen, like the floor moved. For the first time, my daughter was looking at the true cost of the night she'd taken credit for her entire adult life. Not the fun of it, the freight of it. She didn't say anything for a long time, Danny told me. Then she asked Sharon the weirdest thing. What'd she ask? Danny met my eyes. She asked, he paid for all of this? Every year? And Sharon said, yes, ma'am, always has. She had never known those numbers, because she had never once had to see them. What'd she ask? Danny met my eyes. She asked, he paid for all of this? Every year? And Sharon said, yes, ma'am, always has. She had never known those numbers, because she had never once had to see them. What did Diane do, staring down a bill she couldn't cover 2 weeks before Christmas? She did what this family always does. She turned to the next person she could lean on. Danny. She called him that same night. He put it on speaker so I could hear, sitting right across from me at my table. Danny, I need you to float me some money, just till January. The whole thing got complicated, Dad's being impossible, and I'm stuck. My son looked at me. I didn't say a word. This was his line to draw, not mine. How much? Danny asked. She named a number, a big one for a man who saves in a coffee can. No, Danny said. Silence on the line. What? I said no, Diane. I'm not paying for your party. Same as Dad. Are you serious right now? After everything? After everything what? Danny's voice stayed even, but I heard the years in it. After you told everyone I was the screw-up little brother? After you talked about Dad behind his back to anyone who'd listen? A pause. I never said anything about Dad. And here's where my son surprised me. You texted me, Diane, 2 Christmases ago. I still have it. You called him a sad old man who buys his way in. Your words. I felt that one land in my chest. Not anger, just an old ache confirmed. The line was very quiet now. Delete that, Diane said. Her voice had changed, smaller. No, Danny said. I'm not going to use it against you. That's not how Dad does things, and it's not how I do things either. I just wanted you to know I remember. A beat. I'm deleting it after this call. I don't want to carry it anymore. He hung up, and a second later I watched him delete the message, right there at my table. He looked at me, almost apologetic. I didn't go looking for that, Dad. She sent it to me once, a long time ago. I held on to it too long. He set the phone down. We're not going to win this by throwing her own words back at her. We win it by being the people she said we weren't. I told him I understood. I understood completely. Let me step out of the story for just a second, because I have a feeling some of you know exactly where I'm sitting right now. Maybe you've been the one who quietly carried your family. The one who paid, who fixed, who smoothed it over, and got treated like it was nothing. If that's you, do me a favor and tell me in the comments where you finally drew your line. I read them. I really do. And if you want to know what happened at 6 o'clock that Christmas Eve, stay with me. The hardest part is still coming. Hit like and subscribe so I know you're walking through this with me. Now, back to it. The last 2 days before Christmas Eve were the loudest quiet of my life. Diane called. I let it ring. Greg called. Let it ring. A cousin or two, an unknown number that was probably a vendor wanting to know what on earth was going on. I let them all ring. It wasn't cruelty. I'd said my piece, clearly and kindly. There was nothing left to negotiate. A man can only repeat himself so many times before silence is the more honest answer. So I did something I hadn't done in 20 Decembers. I took care of my own house. I cleaned the place. I put up the small tree Carol and I had bought our first married Christmas, the one I usually skipped because I was too busy funding everyone else's. I strung one strand of lights. I bought a turkey breast, not a whole bird, because it was just going to be me and Danny. Ruth called once, and that one I answered. "You holding up?" she asked. "I'm all right," I said. And the strange thing was, I meant it. "They're scrambling," she told me. "Diane's calling everyone. The story keeps changing about whose fault it is." She paused. "You know she's still going ahead with the whole party, right? Booked the hall in her own name, put down the deposit, the works." That surprised me. "Why would she, if she can't pay for it?" "Because she's sure you'll cave." Ruth's voice was flat. "She told her cousin you always do. That you'll show up Christmas Eve, see the grandkids, and quietly settle the bill like you have for 20 years. She's betting the whole night on it." I let that sit. She wasn't wrong to bet that way. That had always been the safe bet. "Not this year," I said. "That's what I told her. She didn't believe me." Ruth paused. "You're doing the right thing, little brother. Carol would have done it 20 years sooner." That got me. Carol would have. Christmas Eve morning, I stood at my kitchen window with a cup of coffee and watched the snow start. Light, then steady. The whole town going white and soft. Somewhere across town, the banquet hall was being set up for a party I'd always paid for and was no longer attending. Tables I wouldn't be at. A chair with my name that would sit empty. I had no idea what they'd do when they realized I truly wasn't coming. I was about to find out. Again, I have to borrow Danny's eyes for this. He went to the party. I asked him to. I wanted one honest witness in that room. At 5:45, Smith Hall looked like Christmas always looked. Warm light spilling out the windows onto fresh snow, a tree in the corner, the string lights I'd paid a company to hang, glowing like nothing was wrong. The neighbors came. The Harpers from across the street, the ones who'd heard Greg say, "I just get in the way." Cousins, friends, the whole crowd that made up the audience for Diane's perfect night. And Diane played her part. Danny said she was flawless out front. Greeting people at the door, taking coats, laughing at the right moments. The gracious hostess of a holiday she had no idea how to pay for. But Danny was watching the edges, and at the edges, it was coming apart. Sharon from the office stood near the bar with a folder, waiting for a private moment that Diane kept not giving her. Diane had scraped together the deposit to hold the date, but the balance for the night was due on the night. That was the deal when you booked it yourself, last minute, with no history. A bartender asked who was settling the tab and got a tight smile and no answer. The bakery had called twice that afternoon about their own unpaid balance. My chair sat at the far end of the table, empty, past the kids' table, near the door, where they always put me. Tonight, nobody was in it. Danny said people kept glancing at it, asking where Grandpa Paul was. Diane kept saying he wasn't feeling well, he might come later, with a brightness that cracked a little more each time. At 5:58, Sharon finally caught Diane by the bar and opened the folder where two of the neighbors could see. And across town, in my quiet kitchen, with the snow coming down, my phone lit up. 6:00, exactly. The first call. The first call was the banquet hall. I let it go. The second was the bakery. Let it go. The third was Diane. I watched her name sit there glowing and pulsing, and I let it go too. Not out of spite. I had nothing new to say. Then they came faster. Greg, a cousin, an unknown number, Diane again. The phone barely went dark between them. I set it on the kitchen table and watched it light up the dim room like a little fire. I made myself a sandwich. I'm not too proud to admit it. A man has to eat, even on the night his whole life rearranges itself. Around 6:15, a different name came up. Ruth. That one I answered. Hall. Her voice was low, steady, but there was something underneath it. "You need to come down here." "Ruth, I already said everything I know what you said. This isn't about the money." A pause. In the background I could hear the party, the music, a hum of voices gone strange and tense. "Something's happening, and you should hear it with your own ears. Not from Danny, not from me, you." I held the phone. The snow was still coming down outside the window. "What's happening?" "Diane's about to find out she's standing on her own for the first time in her life," Ruth said. And the neighbors are about to find out who really gave them 20 Christmases. Another pause. You earned the right to be in the room for that. Don't give it away by hiding in your kitchen. I looked at my coat by the door. You're not coming to pay, Ruth said, reading my silence the way only a sister can. You're coming to be seen. There's a difference. I picked up my keys. I drove through the snow with no wallet in my pocket. I want you to know that. I left it on the kitchen counter on purpose. For once, I was bringing nothing but myself. I parked. I walked across the lot in the cold, up to those warm windows, and I opened the door. The room turned. It's a strange thing, walking into a party that your money built, where you've always been the joke at the far end of the table, and feeling the whole room go quiet because you arrived. The music kept playing, the people did not. Diane was by the bar, and she was not flawless anymore. She was pale. Sharon from the office stood beside her with the open folder. Two of the neighbors, the Harpers, stood close enough to have heard everything. Greg hovered behind his wife, jaw tight. Diane saw me and something flickered across her face. Relief, almost. Like the cavalry had come. Like Dad always comes. Dad! She took a step toward me, voice pitched for the room. Thank God. Tell them there's been a misunderstanding. Tell them you'll... She caught herself. We'll get this sorted. I stood just inside the door, snow melting off my shoulders, and I looked at my daughter. There's no misunderstanding, I said, calm, not loud. The room leaned in to hear me anyway. Dad, you're doing it again. Her voice sharpened, going for the old script in front of the old audience. You're ruining Christmas. You always ruin Christmas. And there it was, the phrase. 20 years of it, said out loud in a full room. I didn't raise my voice. I found you rarely need to. I didn't ruin anything, I said. I just stopped paying for a party I was never really invited to. The room went so still, you could hear the lights buzz. Then, from somewhere behind me, a voice spoke up. It was Sharon, the woman from the hall's office. She wasn't trying to make a scene. She was trying to do her job. And she was confused, and confusion makes people honest. I'm sorry, she said, looking between me and Diane. I just need someone to settle tonight's balance. She hesitated, then added the thing that changed the room. I told Mrs. Whitlock when she booked. It's the first time in all these years the account hasn't been under her father's name. Every Christmas before this one, Mr. Chandler paid for the whole night himself. The hall, the catering, all of it. I just assumed. She didn't finish. She didn't need to. The room did the math out loud, in a dozen quiet faces at once. I watched it move across them. The Harpers, who'd heard Greg brag on his patio that the old man just got in the way. The cousins who'd texted me the word selfish. Friends who'd spent 20 years complimenting Diane on a beautiful party. Every one of them turning, slowly, to look at the empty chair at the far end, the one near the door, the one with my name on it, and then turning to look at me. I didn't say a thing. This was the kind of moment that ruins itself if you talk over it. Greg's face was the one I watched. He'd been wearing this loose, in-control smile since I walked in, the look of a man sure the room was still his. I saw it go, saw it slide right off him as he realized the neighbors he'd performed for had just learned exactly who'd been carrying the thing he took credit for. He looked at the Harpers. The Harpers looked at the floor. Diane stood frozen by the bar, the quote and the contract on the counter beside her, her audience reassembling itself in real time around a truth she'd buried for 2 decades. Dad, she started, Let him finish hearing it, said another voice. Danny, stepping out of the crowd. My son stood in the middle of that room, grease still under his nails, and he didn't raise his voice either. He learned that from me, I suppose. I want to say something since we're all here. He looked around, steady. For years, every Christmas, the story was the same. Dad ruined it. Dad got in the way. Dad made it awkward. He let that hang. I heard it so many times I almost believed it. Nobody moved. But here's the thing nobody mentioned. The man who supposedly ruined Christmas was the only reason any of us had one. He paid for all of it. The hall, the food, the lights you're standing under right now. Danny's voice caught, just slightly. And we let him sit by the door and called him the problem. A few people looked at their shoes. One of the cousins who texted me set down her drink. Then Ruth stepped up beside him, my sister, the one person in that family nobody dared dismiss. I've watched this for 20 years, she said, and her voice carried without trying. I held my tongue because it wasn't my house and they weren't my children. That was my mistake. She looked right at Diane. Your father is not the man who ruined Christmas. He's the man who has quietly given you one every single year while you let people laugh at him for it. Diane's mouth opened, closed, and for the first time in 20 years, nobody in the room jumped in to defend her. No chuckle, no, okay, Dad. No one touched her arm and steered the moment somewhere kinder for her. The silence belonged to her now. All of it. Danny looked at me across the room. My dad never ruined Christmas, he said. My dad was Christmas. I let my son's words settle over the room. Then I spoke, because some things a father should say himself. I'm not here to embarrass anybody, I said. That's not why I came. I looked at the faces, neighbors, family, people I'd fed for 20 years without one of them knowing it was me. I loved doing it, in the beginning, keeping Christmas. After my wife passed, it was how I held us together. I felt the old grief move, quiet and familiar. But somewhere along the way, I started believing the only way to keep my family was to pay for them. And once you believe that, people will let you. Nobody spoke. I'm 61. My heart's not what it was. And I'm done buying a seat at a table where I'm treated like I don't belong. I turned to Diane. Not cruel, just done. I'm not angry with you, but I'm finished paying to be the joke at the end of the room. Diane's eyes were wet now. The performance was gone. There was just a frightened woman behind it. So here's how it goes from now on, I said, and I kept my voice even and kind. Whoever hosts, pays. That's only fair. And me? I'll still come, if I'm wanted. As a father, not as a checkbook. I let that be the last of it. That's all I came to say. I turned toward the door. The snow was still falling beyond the glass, soft and clean. Nobody stopped me. Not one person reached for my arm to keep the peace, the way they always had. And walking out into that cold, lighter than I'd felt in 20 years, I realized something. For once, I'd kept Christmas by leaving it. The party didn't recover. Danny told me people drifted out within the hour, the way folks do when the air's gone out of a room. The neighbors said their polite goodbyes and took their new knowledge home with them. Diane settled what she could that night and put the rest on a payment plan Sharon set up for her. Part on a card, the balance over the next 2 months. The full freight of one Christmas landing on the woman who'd taken credit for 20 of them. I won't pretend I didn't feel something hearing that. Not triumph. Closer to grief. It's a hard thing to watch your child finally feel the weight you've been carrying for them. The story moved through that small town the way stories do. By New Year's, the version going around wasn't, Paul ruined Christmas. It was, did you hear what they let that man's family do to him? The Harpers sent a card. An actual card, in the mail. Inside, in careful handwriting, we're sorry for what we assumed. You always seemed like a good man. Now we know why. A couple of the cousins called to apologize. The one who'd said selfish couldn't quite meet it head on, but she tried, and I let her. I'm not in the business of collecting debts of shame. I'd had enough of debts. Greg got quiet. The thing about a man who lives on the impression he makes. The neighbors he'd performed for were the same neighbors he hoped to sell houses to someday. He'd spent that currency in one careless sentence on a patio, and it didn't come back. I spent that Christmas night at my own small table with Danny, eating turkey breast off paper plates, the little tree glowing in the corner. It was the best one I could remember. Then, 2 days after Christmas, my phone rang with a call I didn't expect. It was Diane. Not bright this time, not breezy, just tired. Can I come over? She asked. Just me. She came alone, which told me something. She sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd added up 20 years, and for a while she didn't say much. I saw the numbers, she finally said. All of them. I never knew, Dad. I swear I never sat down and looked. I know, I said. I made it easy not to. She turned her coffee cup in her hands. Everyone keeps asking me how I let it happen, and I don't have a good answer. It was always handled. You always handled it. I never had to think about it, so I didn't. I didn't rush her. I've learned the value of letting a quiet sit. Greg's furious, she said. Not at himself, at me. Says I made him look like a fool in front of the whole neighborhood. A short, bitter laugh. Like it was my job to keep him from saying it. There it was, the thing I'd half suspected. I let it pass for now. I don't know how to do this, she admitted, and her voice broke a little. I don't know how to do Christmas. The money, the planning, any of it. You always... She stopped. I'm 38, and I don't know how to throw a party I actually pay for. And I felt it then. Not vindication, the plain sad truth of it. I'd done this. Not the cruelty, that was hers, but the helplessness. I'd paid for everything so long that my own daughter never learned to stand. I'd called it love, and it had crippled her. You'll learn, I told her. It's not too late to learn. She looked at me like she wanted to believe it. After she left, the old voice came back, the reasonable one, the one that sounds like love and costs you everything. She's struggling, Paul. She came to you. She apologized, more or less. Why not help her out, just this once? Cover the rest of that balance. Set up a little fund for next year. You have it. What's it for, if not your kids? I sat in the dark with that voice for a long time. It's a persuasive thing, 20 years deep. I actually got as far as opening my banking app. Thumb over the screen. It would have been so easy. 3 taps and I'd be the man who fixed it again. The needed one. The hero of the morning after. That's exactly what scared me. Because that voice wasn't love. It was the same hook that had held me for 2 decades. Help once, and you're back on the line. Help once, and she never learns to stand. And we do this dance again next December with a different excuse. My phone buzzed. Danny. Don't do it, Dad, the text said. Whatever you're thinking about doing, don't. I almost laughed. The boy knows me. A second later, one from Ruth. Saw Diane's car at your place. If she asks for money, the answer is the same as last week. I set the phone down. I closed the banking app without doing a thing. It turns out the hardest part wasn't standing up to Greg or walking into that party. The hardest part was sitting alone in my kitchen and not rescuing my own daughter from a lesson she needed to learn. Love, I was finding out at 61, sometimes means letting the people you love stand on their own 2 feet, even when every part of you wants to catch them. The crack between Diane and Greg didn't stay quiet for long. Some things, once they split, keep splitting. I heard about it from Denny, who heard it from Diane. There'd been a fight. A real one. The kind that doesn't get smoothed over by morning. It started over the bill, of course. Greg wanted to know how Diane planned to fix the mess. Diane reminded him that he was the one who'd run his mouth on the patio where the neighbors could hear. You told everyone we carried this family, she'd said. You told them Dad just got in the way. You said he'd pay like he always does, Greg shot back. That was your read, your father, your call. There it was, out loud, between the two of them. The whole partnership that had pushed me to the end of the table for 20 years, turning on itself the moment the money dried up. Each one reaching for the other to take the blame. It turns out a marriage built on someone else's wallet gets thin fast when the wallet closes. I didn't celebrate it. I want to be clear about that. Watching my daughter's marriage strain wasn't a prize I wanted. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel the ground shift. The alliance that had run me down for 2 decades was no longer aimed at me. It was aimed at itself. They're talking about counseling, Danny told me. Or talking about not talking. Hard to say. That's between them, I said. And I meant it. I was finally, blessedly, out of the middle of it. For 20 years, I'd been the glue holding a thing together that maybe shouldn't have been held. Now the glue was gone, and everyone was finding out what was actually load-bearing. It wasn't me. It never had been. The next Christmas looked nothing like the 20 before it. There was no banquet hall, no catering bill, no rented linens, no string lights hung by a company. There was my house, the one I'd kept warm for everyone else all those years, finally warm for me. I hosted. Small. I made the turkey myself, the way Carol used to, looking up half the steps as I went. Danny brought a girlfriend, a kind woman who laughed easily and asked me about my work like it mattered. Ruth came early and stayed late and bossed me around my own kitchen, which felt exactly right. And Diane came. She came with the dish she'd made herself, a little lopsided, and she came with her hands empty of demands. No clipboard, no assignments, just my daughter, quieter than I'd ever seen her, asking if she could help set the table. Things weren't fixed. I want to be honest with you about that. You don't undo 20 years over one turkey. There was a carefulness between us, a tenderness with bruises still under it. She and Greg were living apart by then, figuring out whatever they were going to figure out. But she was learning. She'd thrown a small birthday for her kids that fall and paid for it herself, and she'd called to tell me about it, proud as a girl, and I'd been proud right back. That Christmas, I sat at the head of my own table, not because I'd paid for it, because my family put me there. The grandkids ran around the little tree, Ruth told a story that made Danny laugh so hard he choked. The snow came down outside the same as it always had, and nobody, not once, all night, called me the man who ruined Christmas. Late that night, after the grandkids had crashed on the couch and Danny was washing dishes he insisted on washing, Diane found me by the window. We stood there a minute, watching the snow. "I owe you more than I can say," she said quietly. "I'm not going to try to say all of it tonight. I'd get it wrong." "You don't have to," I told her. "I do, though. Just one part." She turned to me. "Thank you, Dad, for all those years. I never once said it. I never even saw it." Her voice went thin. "I'm sorry it took losing it for me to see you." There was no but on the end of it. No favor riding behind it. No clipboard, no project, no balance due. Just a daughter thanking her father, 20 years late, and meaning it. I'd waited a long time to hear that. Longer than I'd let myself admit. "I forgive you," I said. Because I did. Not because she'd earned it with a perfect apology, but because carrying it was heavier than setting it down, and I was done carrying things that weren't mine. She cried a little. I put my arm around my daughter, and for the first time in 2 decades, it didn't cost me a dime, and it was worth more than every check I'd ever written. Here's what I learned, and I'll give it to you plain, the way I wish someone had given it to me at 40. You cannot buy your way into someone's respect. You can only buy your way into being used. The day I stopped paying was the day I started belonging. Self-worth isn't something you purchase for other people. It's something you finally decide you're allowed to keep. I keep mine now. I earned it. Everyone went home eventually. Danny and his girl, Ruth with her leftovers, Diane with her sleeping kids bundled into the car. I stood in the doorway and watched the taillights disappear into the snow. Then I went back inside and turned off the little tree. I stood there a moment in the dark, in the quiet of a house that was finally, only, mine. 20 years I'd kept this place lit for everyone but me. Tonight it had been full of the right people, for the right reasons, and the warmth of it stayed in the walls after they'd gone. I had kept Christmas, all those years, by paying for it. This year I'd kept it by being worth showing up for. I turned off the last light and went to bed a free man. Let me step out of the story one more time, because we're at the end now, and I want to talk to you directly. If you've ever been the one who carried your family in silence, who paid and fixed and got treated like it was nothing, I hope my story gives you a little courage. Setting a boundary isn't the end of love. It's where loving yourself begins. You're allowed to keep your own worth. Tell me in the comments, if it were you, would you have stayed home that night? I read every single one. Hit that like button, subscribe so you don't miss what comes next, and check the description for another story I think you'll want to hear. The one about the year I finally decided to sell the house everybody assumed belonged to all of us. I'll see you there. Take care of yourself, and don't you dare spend another Christmas being someone's checkbook.